Um, Hey, Rebecca, welcome back after Chag. Hold on, let's bring up the laws. Alrighty, everyone. We are still in 77, and we're, I believe, on Law 19. Okay. So Law 19, we were speaking about the Kiddush and the eating of the bread. And now the law says like this. Law 19 of the Kitzur, the laws of Shabbos. Imloi kara haparsha Imloi kara parsha be'erev Shabbos. If one did not do the reading of the parsha like we do Shnai Mikra Ve'echatargum, we read it twice. Hey Aaron, twice. We read the original text of the Chumash and we read the translation, so to say, in Unkelos called the Targum. It's called Shnai Mikra Ve'echatargum. So Imloi kara parsha be'erev Shabbos. If one did not read the parsha before Shabbos, Lo Yechel Shabbos b'Shachris. A person should not eat Shabbos morning/lunch until one reads the parsha. And if for whatever reason you did not eat before you ate, one should read before mincha. But the Evid, in a worst case scenario, one could catch, so to say, catch up until Tuesday. Reason is because Wednesday already starts connected to the next Shabbos. That's why we say on Wednesday in the Hayom Yom L'chun Ranana, because Wednesday is already 3 days before Shabbos is connected to Shabbos, and therefore, so Tuesday up until Tuesday, one could say Havdalah, and one could say that we read the weekly parsha as in a way of connected to the previous Shabbos. Yes, Aaron.
I don't know. First, I don't understand. If you go to a minyan on Shabbos, you're going to read it. And even our minyan club doesn't eat until after the Torah. Then what I don't understand is that if you're in a place where you can't take a Sefer Torah, then what do you do? Like,
okay, so the truth is he doesn't say over here in line 19 if he's referring to just reading the parsha or reading what we call Shnai Mikra Bechatargum, the two that we read twice the Chumash and then the translation. But even if you just take it at face value, that he's just talking about reading the parsha on Shabbos. So if you have the Sefer Torah, obviously we read the Sefer Torah. That's done also in the morning. If you do it in if you don't have a Sefer Torah, you could read it without the Sefer Torah. But it seems clearly, because it mentions before Shabbos and after Shabbos, it's not only referring to the reading of the weekly portion on the Torah, because that we only do universally only on Shabbos, besides the parts that we read on Saturday afternoon, Shabbos afternoon, Mondays and Thursdays. But the whole parsha we only read Shabbos in the Torah once. So it seems to be that he's referring to the studying privately of the parsha, which we do 2 times the original text and 1 times the Targum. But he doesn't mention that Shnai Mikra Ve'echatargum. So see, if you just take it at face value, you would assume that just reading the parsha at least once should be done at some time, either before Shabbos, next best is before Shabbos lunch, before the end of Shabbos, or maximum up until Tuesday.
but now the class that you give on Torah would count as 1 time.
No, when he means the Torah, it means the actual reading of the passages.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Rebecca.
Does this apply to women the same way it applies for men?
Usually things that are time sensitive are for men, not for women, but there's no reason why a woman should not participate in studying of the Torah. Women don't have the obligation for mitzvahs that are zman grama, that are time sensitive. This is obviously time sensitive, as he just says in the law. But again, that doesn't mean that you disregard it. It means that the reason why women are not obligated in time sensitive mitzvahs are because of their responsibility at home. That sometimes the time restrictions don't allow it could get into the way of what their obligations are at home. But if you obviously have the time and the ability, just like in everything else, you should definitely try to study the parsha on a Shabbos by Shabbos basis.
But you're supposed to read the parsha twice and Uncle is once. Like that's the mitzvah.
That's the way one does Shnai. It's called Shnai Mikra Targum, 2 times Mikra. But he doesn't mention over here about the 2 times Mikra Targum. He mentions about reading the parsha. It says if you do not read the weekly Torah portion, he doesn't say. So it means we do it extra 2 times with the unclis is to enhance the reading, but the minimum of the reading is to read it once. If you hear it in the synagogue, you hear it in the synagogue with the Torah. If you don't hear it in the synagogue, then try to read it yourself. And that's why a lot of shows, if you participate in a show for whatever reason that there's no minyan, then you don't just they would read the parsha anyways to try to go through the parsha together, because of the idea of reading the parsha on Shabbos.
But it's halacha. It's not a minhag to read the parsha every Shabbos.
It's clearly a halacha. It's brought down right now, and this is a Shulchan Aruch. It's not a minhag. It's a halacha.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Now, next thing is law number 20. Aser lihis anois b'Shabbos. One is not allowed to fast on Shabbos. The same time is for the sake of the fast. I feel this man Kitzur, even for a little bit of time. Meaning to say that you're not allowed to fast. It doesn't mean you have to be eating every single second, right? Because the fasting doesn't the definition of fasting is not that you're not eating. That's why he says the shame time is for the sake of fasting. So if a person decides for their diet, for whatever reason, that they want to avoid eating between meals, that's not called fasting. But if a person says I need to fast for the sake of fasting, so you're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. Therefore, this year, hold on, Aaron. This year we had the 10th of Teves went into Shabbos. It was Friday. So the custom was that even though sometimes you go to shul and Friday night and you don't make Kiddush right away until you get home, etc. But that week, which was the 10th of Teves, we all had to daven early so we could make Kiddush immediately. So we shouldn't be fasting at all on Shabbos because you're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. And then the reason why we weren't eating, even though on a regular week you don't eat until you make Kiddush, but you're not fasting. But that Friday, the 10th of Teves, we were fasting. So therefore, we have to come home early to break that fast. So we shouldn't fast on Shabbos. Yes, Aaron.
But Yom Kippur is an exception.
So yeah, Yom Kippur is an exception. Yes.
Okay.
And he says, "Afilu zman katzir," even a little bit of time. And therefore, a person can say, "Well, the 10th of Teves, it's winter." And so the reason we rush home from shul on the 10th of Teves is not just because we're hungry, because halachically you're not allowed to fast on Shabbos. And he says, even if it's not for the sake of a fast, just avoiding eating, you should not avoid eating. He says it is forbidden in any case to fast until noon. So let's see what the footnote is. A lot of people don't eat, especially if you don't eat until before davening, you won't eat before noon. So it says, even if you delay eating because of doing a mitzvah, unless you enjoy it more than eating. This is the famous idea that Shulchan Aruch quotes, that sometimes this is one of the reasons why if a person, there's a concept called in halacha, called tainis chala, a person who fasts for a bad dream. Some people have a bad dream and they're very unsettled by this bad dream, and the way they kind of deal with their bad dream is by fasting. So the fast should, so to say, drain the energy of the bad dream. So that's called a tanis chalam, a fasting for a dream. There's a concept. Now, hold on. So the halacha is that if a person is extremely unsettled on Shabbos because of the bad dream, and by eating, it's going to continue the unsettledness, and the person insists themselves they must fast in order to get kind of calm to relax. So then you're allowed to fast on Shabbos only because, like he says, eating would be torture because you're in a situation of anxiety. But you have to fast a separate time after that during the week to make up for fasting on Shabbos. So you have to atone for that fasting. But because if eating is not pleasurable and Shabbos is all about oineg, so you're allowed to fast, but it's not something that's recommended unless it's extreme. In Chabad, the Alter Rebbe was very against fasting for dreams, even not on Shabbos. I mean, we have a famous story. His son had a very bad dream, and he fasted. And his father was upset. The Alter Rebbe is upset. So, although it's brought down in the law, there is a concept of fasting, so to say, to atone or to relax a bad dream. The Alter Rebbe wasn't favorable of one practicing that. Yes, Adam.
We discussed this before, but my son taught me that his Rebbe, and I think you said this about Chabad, that you're not allowed to have a meal before, and a meal consists of bread. So you don't eat any bread. You never had a meal, but you can still eat. So my son always drinks like a chocolate milk, and I have a bowl of cereal. It's not bread.
Yeah, so then you're not fasting. Breaking the fast doesn't mean you have to have bread. We have to have bread on Shabbos for the meals of kibbutz of amount of an egg. That's separate. But the idea over here is that you shouldn't even avoid food until noon on Shabbos because you're hungry and
Right, but you can't have a meal, and a meal is bread. So you don't have the bread, you never had a meal.
But there's a lot in between a meal and eating and fasting. You could eat if you eat like the
Right.
chocolate.
He eats, I eat.
Okay.
You guys eat.
Yeah. Okay. Now he continues along this line. He continues and says that aser lihitzar chas v'shalom, a person should not grieve. Al whatever the misfortune that you've experienced, that you would grieve, you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. Instead, one should seek mercy from the merciful one. Meaning, instead of focusing on the tzara, and therefore, for instance, this applies that a person who's in mourning, and we know the Jewish custom, the Jewish law, I should say, of that we mourn in the Shiva, we don't show any mourning on Shabbos. And even if, God forbid, a person has experienced a death on the Shabbos, one is not supposed to try, although obviously every person according to what you're able, but one should try not to show any grievances on the Shabbos and to have any outward sign of expressing tsar on Shabbos. I mean, Shabbos is not just so to say an opportune time to be happy and to be in a joyful mood, but it's obligatory. A person has to try to avoid anything that's connected to misfortune or mourning of a misfortune on the Shabbos. So he says in footnote number 76, he just gives the reference for that. Okay, now again, continuing on that line. So we talked about the negative. We spoke about not fasting and to not grieve. Now, on the contrary, on the other flip side, mitzvah lahabra b'peiros, a person should have lots of fruit, umigdanyais, and delicacies, uminereach. A lot of people have special spices or psamims that they have. Today they have Baruch Hashem. In the past few years, they have a company here called Shmek. It means Shmek means in Hebrew, in Yiddish, to smell. Evidently, the person's name is Shmek. But either way, that you can buy all kind of nice different mixes of things that are nice, all part of the experience of enjoying Shabbos. So therefore, on Shabbos, if one is more careful on delicacies that you don't eat, whether it's nice pastries or candies or other things that are pleasant. So on Shabbos, we're more lenient to say on our diet to make sure that we enjoy the Shabbos, but to be very strict on yourself on Shabbos, it's not part of the spirit of Shabbos. So good fruit. So again, this is all part of what we learned from our teachers, Hillel and Shammai, that they both would throughout the week, different ways, but they both were basically the entire week focused on Shabbos. This is, if they saw anything good, this is for Shabbos or this is for Shabbos. So when a person, for instance, if you're in the market and you see something nice that could continue to be. I mean, sometimes it won't last until Shabbos, but if you have something that continue till Shabbos to buy, when we buy flowers on Shabbos, that's part of the experience of joy on Shabbos, to make your house in a joyful mood. So anything you have that's a good delicacy or something nice, to reserve it for Shabbos is actually something that one should do if possible. And then, of course, if you find something nicer, you could replace. Yes, Aaron.
I heard, or through my family and everything, that you're supposed to have one more foods than you would on a weekday. So if you have two foods, at a meal, then you should have 3 foods on Shabbos. If you can have more, great, but try to have one more than normal.
Yes, and he adds this. This is not just about joining for Shabbos. This is also in order to complete the amount of blessings. Now he says also, "Kedei lahash lemei brachas," to be able to make me know that King David has instituted that a person should try the best they can to make 100 blessings a day. Mei brachas. Atikar ma elameya. Ma Hashem, based on the verse that says, "Ma Hashem alekecha sha'ol mi'imach." What is God asking for you? Al tikra ma, don't say ma, but say meya, 100. God wants us to make 100 blessings a day for different things, not specific things. So throughout the week, it's easier because we make the 18, 19 blessings 3 times a day in the davening. So you already covered almost over close to 60 blessings just in the 3 Shemona Esrei. And then eating and other things, so you already pretty much get 100 blessings. But on Shabbos, when we only do 5 blessings in the Shemona Esrei, so we're missing many of the blessings we have in the week. So in order to add, one makes different blessings on foods, candies, delights, spices, because we know we make brachas on smell, and therefore, Kidei lahash lemei brachas, to be able to make up for 100 blessings. And he adds not just the idea of the blessing, like I said before, to do different things that are pleasurable. Like it says, Shabbos, that you should call Shabbos a delight. So in order to add to the delight of Shabbos, we have delights, plus we have blessings, and also so therefore we also have the idea that if a person struggles with 100 blessings, to answer Amen. When we were growing up, one of the things that we would do is that when in the morning, we know with the morning blessings, right? We make the blessings in the morning when we wake up, Birchas HaShachar. So some people have the custom to do the blessings in the synagogue. In Chabad, we do the blessings as soon as we wake up. So when we were kids, when we would wake up, we would all, my brothers and sisters together, we would make the blessings standing near my father, so he could say Amen. So that would help him in his 100 blessings on the Shabbos. Yes, Aaron.
If you made a blessing to eat certain foods and they have a smell, can you also make the blessing on the smell?
That usually if it's just a food we don't, then you're eating the food. If like for instance, if people have a blessing on peiros, there's a blessing for good fruits, but it's not the blessings of smell. We're not learning the laws right now, but then in the blessings of smell, it's not so simple when one makes a blessing. For instance, if a person works in like a perfume shop, not every second they walk into the main room do they make a blessing. The halach is you make it, let's say, once a day. We're not talking about perfume. Perfume, it has to be a proper spice. But if let's say you work in a spice shop, so and it really smells nice, so you don't keep on making the blessing over and over again. You would make it once a day. So we have to when we learn the laws of smelling, we'll get into the specifics. But
Okay.
There's first of all in the spices themselves, not everyone has the same blessing. Some is atzei, some is isvei, some is mine. So there's different types, alaperos. So the different things we make blessings on. I in the synagogue, actually a Sephardic synagogue that I pray in every day, they have them all lined up in order of how one makes the blessings on the different spices.
Okay, now I also saw in Borough Park the Hasidic on Friday when they buy the flowers for their wife. They buy the same flower that smells when you shake it on Sukkot, and they smell it before at the Kiddush.
Yes, people that there's a Talmud for that. The Dasim. The Dasim is the what do they call it? The willows. That people buy the willows before Shabbos as well. So the famous story that when we're coming up to Lag BaOmer, that when Rab Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Elazar came out of the cave after 13 years. So they saw a Jew running on Erev Shabbos with the 2 willows, and he said, "What is it for? Why do you need 2?" He said, "One is for Shamar, one is for Zachar." So based on that story, we have already, that's a tradition already going thousands of years to buy the Hadassim before Shabbos. Today, you go into the Shuk in Yerushalayim, Machne Yehuda, they have these women who come and they sell big bunches of different things that you could buy for the Shabbos for good fragrance. Okay. Law number 23. It's a good thing to have. We know that the soul enjoys the smell more than the body, so it's in order to give it's a nice thing to awaken the spirit of your soul through the blessings of fragrances versus the blessings of food. Okay.
Can you use the same smell? Just real quick, you can use the same smell that you use for
Shabbos.
in Shabbos.
Yeah.
Okay.
Number 23. Achasu de Shachris. So what should one do after lunch, Shabbos lunch, the second meal? He calls it Suda Shachris, the morning meal. Again, because if you're davening early, you should be able to eat at 11 or so. Is Im Ragal Yishan, if your custom is to go to sleep, take a nap, so Yishan, you should sleep. So I mean that's a special custom. You know that part of the mitzvah of joy on Shabbos is to sleep. One should not wake up specifically early. No, it's brought down. You shouldn't wake up too early on Shabbos because the mitzvah to sleep. Part of joy is sleeping. So one should sleep on Shabbos. However, he gives a thing. These people have to know. There's a lot of people, if you're traveling or you're so al yomer, a person should not say, at least not vocally, should not say, Isha, and I want to go to sleep. So I should be rested for Saturday night. That you can't do because then you're preparing Shabbos for after Shabbos. So we said you now do things on Shabbos for after Shabbos. You shouldn't even at least voice that I'm going to sleep, so I should be rested for Saturday night. I know that we used to travel to the north. It's a long drive home from Israel, the north to Jerusalem, and so I sometimes would try to take a nap because I was scared to be tired on the way home. But you're not at least supposed to really do that, or at least not voice it, because then you're really actually preparing on Shabbos for the week, for after Shabbos. He says he quotes the source. Okay.
So it's better to sleep than to even learn?
No, then let's go continue. Law number 24. After a person eats and takes a short nap or a long nap, however, one should have kviyos, should have set times for studying Torah. We know the idea of kviyos is to have a set time. It's not just a casual time. One of the most important things, and it's been a tradition by the Jewish people for many generations, is to have kviyos itim l'Torah, to have set times for Torah. So a person should have a set time to study. Parsha Shabbos, number, because it says with regard to Shabbos, and we just read it a few weeks ago. Vayakel Moshe, the Moshe gathered the Jewish people. V'darshu Rabbeinu Zechronim Lebracha, and our rabbis have taught us. Lama Nema b'Parsha Zu Vayakel. Why specifically? Moshe spoke to the Jewish people many times. Why, when he spoke to them about the laws of Shabbos, does he use the word gathering? He gathered the Jews, not just he spoke to the Jews. We don't find that expression of a yakel in the other parts of the Torah when in the happenings of the desert. We have the mitzvah of hakel, but not in the happenings that Moshe gathered. God told Moshe, this is a medrash. Reid vaseli kihilos gedolos b'Shabbos. Go and gather big groups of people on the Shabbos. So they should learn from Moshe. The generations to come should learn that one should have set times to study Torah in a public setting on Shabbos. So it's not just some people want to reserve that time for private study. So the idea is, yes, one should study Torah, and one needs some private time, should study private time, but one also has to join a public setting of Torah on Shabbos. That's why Yaakov, it says, Lilma Torah Barabim. So whether it is with children, whether it is with your family, or whether it is, traditionally parents have the time to study with their children on the Shabbos, but also try to join a shir at some point on the Shabbos, which that's really the mitzvah of the hakel. Oidamrun, also it's brought down. That the reason that God gave us the Shabbos and the holidays is not just a day off, but it's a time to la'asik b'Torah, to engage in Torah study. Ki harbe anoshim, because many people, trudim kol yimei achol b'milachta, they're busy and preoccupied in their day-to-day activities during the week. Ve'ein lam penai la'asik b'Torah b'kviyas, and they maybe have pockets of openings that they could study Torah, but they don't have set times. It's hard to have a shir sometimes, not that you shouldn't. A person should try to have a shir every day. But if you don't have a shir every day, a few times a week, but if you can't do a few times a week, at least Shabbos, there's no excuse to have. That's the idea of the kaviyas, the idea of set times. Everyone has to not work on Shabbos. They're pnuyim, they're free of their work. Therefore, then you could study Torah properly. So when he says properly, what does he mean by properly versus, so to say, not properly? Is the idea of kaviyah, set, public, study, ashir. So that's what Shabbos is for.
Turn the light off, okay?
Does a shir mean with a rabbi?
It doesn't have a shir could be in many settings. It could be a shir, it could be a chavrusa, it could be a group of Torah study. I mean, whatever it should be in a way of kaviyas. The main thing is it shouldn't be casual. It should be a set group. Yeah, people have a Torah study groups on Shabbos all the time. The point is, this has been all the way from Moshe Rabbeinu.
Our shul has it. You could just join the shul shir. They have it
Absolutely.
every time.
You should join the shul shir. Not you could. If you have a choice of just studying at home or joining a shir, we see clearly you should join a shir. So the idea of kaviyas. So then you could do it properly. Therefore, bali malacha or bali batim, especially the people who are working people, they don't have the opportunity to study Torah throughout the week. By them, it's more obligatory for them. To study Torah and Shabbos Kodesh. Of course, each person according to understanding and ability. Obviously, it's better to join a shir that is more appropriate for you versus, so to say, a shir that maybe you're just sitting there. But again, even if there's no shir that maybe the shir is above you, or there's or it's maybe simple for you, better to sit at a shir than to sit alone. A lot of people say, well, the rabbi is not teaching anything I don't know. I'm on to learn something I don't know. We see clearly that when God wanted for Moshe was the vayakil, to gather, not just because when there's a gathering, that's more likely that you're going to learn. That's also true. When you're part of a group, you're committed to it. A lot of people are, the first time when I know someone's going to stop learning is when they start off with saying, I used to give a shir in the shul. So some people would come and then they would join the shir, and then they said, no, let's learn separately from the shir. And I knew usually that's going to last 2-3 weeks, and the next step is they're not going to learn at all. Because when you have a shir, you're part of something, you maintain it. Consistency and is a very strong part of Yiddishkeit. To be consistent is a sign of stability, and also of that's part of your schedule, as opposed to just making free time. So when you're part of a shir, that's why it's the people who join Daf Yomi shirs, or people who shir. The power of the shir is consistency, and also the idea of gathering. When you have gathered Jewish people, we learned Pirkei Avos, is we have gathering of Jewish people together, that whenever there's 10 people together, that brings a higher level of the Shekhinah, a higher level of Hashem, when he rests amongst a group of people as opposed to individuals. So again, when you have an opportunity, if you have a choice, join a shir, especially in the summer. We know the custom of learning the Pirkei Avot. We're starting now. This Shabbos, we're going to all learn together the first chapter of Avos, of the tractate of Avos, that we learn every Shabbos after in the afternoon. So it's a good time to find a good Avos shir, a good Mishnah shir, to learn it in a communal setting as opposed to learning it alone. But it doesn't have to specifically be that, but that's a good idea for starting right now. Okay, number 81, 82. These are all the references. 83, another reference, and I believe that's all the footnotes on this in this chapter. Okay, we're going to move on. I was considering skipping the next two chapters, but I'm not a person who likes to skip. So we're going to learn it, but maybe a little faster, because it's the laws of the Torah reading on Shabbos. And number 79, number 80 is already more, again, back to the laws of the specifics of Shabbos. But most of us try to go to shul, so it's good to know what's going on and the different customs in the different shuls when it comes to the Torah reading. Okay. Before we go to the chapter number 78, any questions before we move on to the next chapter? Okay, so let's just start, at least to get started, in chapter number 78. Here is the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, chapter 78, laws of Torah reading on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, and traditionally we know that there's different types of reading of the Torah throughout the year. We have We read Shabbos afternoon, Mincha. We read Mondays and Thursdays. We read, of course, Shabbos morning, the whole parsha. We read when it comes to the new month, Rosh Chodesh, on a day of a fast, on a day of a holiday, all have Torah readings. Different readings for different times. The weekly reading that we cover the entire Torah in a year, and therefore we celebrate Simchas Torah, the completion of the Torah. That is the reading that we do on Shabbos afternoon, Mondays and Thursdays. Everything else is day related, not to finish the cycle of Torah. If one pays attention, there's different amounts of people that get called up to the Torah. There's in the weekdays and Shabbos afternoon will be 3 people. A fast will be 4 people. A fast will be 3 people. A Rosh Chodesh will be 4 people. A holiday will be 5 people. On the Yom Kippur, 6 people by day. So there's different readings, different amounts of people that get called up, and then there's different customs. If we add to the 7, 8 people, right? We have always on Shabbos we have the 7 aliyot, and then we have the maftir reading that we read a few verses again, repeated of the Torah that's connected to the person who's going to say the Haftarah or going to be the one that makes the blessings in the Haftarah. So one also notices that there's the concept of the Kohen and the Levite, that the priest and the Levite get preferences as when it comes to the aliyot, that you first give an aliyah if you can to a Kohen if he's in the room, and then following the Kohen there's the Levite, and if there's no Kohen, so then we it's even better in that case, and I'm not just saying it because I'm a Levite, but to also try to have a Levite get the first aliyah, but then we're not so strict if there's no Kohen to give the first aliyah to a Levite, we could skip straight to a Yisrael, a non-Levite or Kohen. Yes, Aaron.
Then what's my role? Because every Shabbos I'm the guy who stands opposite of the Gabbai,
yeah,
and I cover and uncover the Torah with the cloth.
Well, there's your role right there. No,
But what's the tradition behind it?
Well, the idea is that we kind of it's respect for the Torah to not just leave it like that. So you have kind of surrounded by people, like you would have a person who's of importance doesn't come alone, right? It says when the Kohen Gadol would walk, he had his skan on one side and the other on the other side. So when we were walking again in education, we got as children, which was part of our education, was that if we would walk home, my brother and I, when we would walk home, my brother and I with my father, it was never that my father was on the sides. So you had my father would walk in between, and me and my brothers would be on either side. That's so the same idea of it's a sign of respect is by surrounding the Torah with people from the right and the left. Okay. So the first law is like this. He starts off before he even starts. His first law is about the additions. Chabad doesn't have this law. But the law is that there are people that will do additions, meaning you have the obligatory amount of aliyahs that have to be on Shabbos, which is 7, plus the Haftorah. But let's say you want to give more. The only time they do that is in extreme circumstances. Traditionally, what's that?
Extreme, because when it's like someone's getting married, so you want everyone to come up, they just keep repeating one part of the Torah.
So again, we don't have that custom. So that's what I mean by extreme circumstances. I mean to say is just to sit there on a regular week with it's not a bar mitzvah or a wedding, and just to add aliyah, some people would do it, but you have to remember it's time consuming. You have to be there's a concept in halacha called tircha d'tzibura, which means you're not supposed to agonize the community. So, for instance, a proper shul should have everything ready for Shabbos. It means if you come into a shul that has a gabbai and has people that are in charge, and the Sefer Torah is not in its proper place on Shabbos, that's not appropriate. Because when it comes time for the job of the Gabbai is, one of the Gabbai of the Shamash is to make sure that the Torah, that you don't have to move the Torahs from one place to the next in the actual scroll, because you didn't get it ready before Shabbos. For instance, if you have Haftorah, now it's after the holidays, and you only have one Sefer Torah, now we're going to read back in Shmini. So the Shamash should make sure that that's done before Shabbos, so the community doesn't have to wait while you're getting it organized. So the same idea applies over here. Just to add aliyahs, because you want to add aliyahs, if the community is okay with it, so that's part of the joy of the experience. But if it's just to, just to add a few more liyas and it's agonizing to the community, one should be sensitive. Again, our custom is we don't add, but others do. Okay. So now he starts off when we add in aliyahs, means after the 7, it's called achron. Yoichel likros koyin olevi lachron. What does he mean to say? That if you're doing a 7 plus 1, which means 7 aliyahs plus the haftorah, so the Kohen and Levite only have an opportunity, because of the importance of them, that they don't just get mixed in. The Kohen gets the first aliyah, the Levite gets the second aliyah, and either a Kohen, Levite, or Yisrael could get the maftir. What about if you add aliyahs? You've done 7, and now you're going to do an 8th or 9th aliyah. Can a Kohen and Levi get outside of the 7, one of those aliyahs? So he says yes. Now again, of course, there's obviously different laws of if there's some people have the custom, if there's no Kohen, to do 2 Levites, or if there's a Levite to do 2 Kohanim. But the problem with that is that the concern is that people may think the first Kohen is not a real Kohen, so you're actually it's we don't have the custom to add 2 Kohanim because of the same Kohen would get twice, or the Levite would get twice. So we shouldn't be questioning the lineage. So the reason why we call it the second Kohen is because maybe we don't trust the first Kohen to be a real Kohen. But even the way, but for the achron, for the extra aliyah, you could add a Kohen could have that aliyah or a Levite. Because we have already called up 7 people. It's also the last one of outside of the reading. So aside from maftir, so therefore it's not a problem to give that to a Kohen or a Levi. And he adds, V'chein maftir, also the maftir, and this is of course the custom, universally, Yechem likros Kohen or Levi, the maftir could be read by the Kohen or the Levite. Feel the Kohen echad la'achron, the Kohen echad l'maftir, and not only that, although sometimes, again, like I said, we try not to do 2 Kohanim one after the next, so it shouldn't look as if we're questioning the lineage of the Kohen, but because there are 2 different types of readings, we don't have that concern. So you could do a Kohen for the last aliyah, after the 7, and then a Kohen from after, and it's not a problem. Because here we have the Kaddish. We say the Kaddish before we say maftir, and because the Kaddish separates it, so it's not like we've called 2 Kohanim one after the next, would question the lineage of the first Kohen. Ubesimchas Torah. So in Simchas Torah, we know that we have 3 Torahs. We read the whole Zos HaBracha, and then we read the Bereshis. So Simchas Torah, Shematzim Shloishes Sefer Torah, we take out 3 Sefer Torah. Yichayim Nikras Kohen Echad L'Chasan Torah. We could call 1 Kohen for the final Aliyah, which is called Chasan Torah. Ve'echad L'Chasan Bereshis, and a separate Kohen for Bereshis. Again, it's not a problem. Ve'echad L'Maftir, known from after. Kivan Shekol Echad Kohen B'Sefer Torah Achad, because they're read in different scrolls. Hold on here. Aval B'Rosh Chodesh Tevis, but the only time we don't do it, even though it's 3 separate scrolls, is, for instance, on Shabbos Chanukah. He says if Shabbos Rosh Chodesh falls out, if Rosh Chodesh Tevis falls out on Shabbos, the first of Tevis falls out on Shabbos, that means it would be part of Chanukah. And then again, we would take out 3 scrolls, 1 for the Parsha, which we would read 6 readings, 1 for the Rosh Chodesh, that would be the 7th reading, and then 1 for the Haftorah, which would be the Chanukah reading. So in that case, you cannot have a Kohen. However, Afal Pisha Maitzim Gamkin Shloisha Sefer Torah, though we take out 3 Sefer Torah there, Afilim writes in Nikres Sefer Torah Rishon Shmoni Gavri, even if you're going to call 8 people to the first reading, to the first Torah, in Rashi Nikres Kohen Shia Shmini, that case you can't bring the Kohen as the 8th one, which would be in the 2nd Sefer Torah, Kivan Shadain Ein Zeh Mashlim Akriya B'Sefer Zeh, because you didn't complete the reading of 7 in the first Sefer Torah. Because of that, so it's connected, and therefore it'd be a question of a lineage. Better not to call a Kohen. Maslim who b'Sefer Sheni, we complete the reading of the week in the 2nd Sefer Torah. Maslim who b'Sefer Sheni shkoyin by Parshas Chodesh v'az yachayil nikrois. Kivin shadai maslim akriya b'Sefer Zeh. Maslim who b'Sefer Hasheni shkoyin by Parshas Chodesh v'az yachayil nikrois, and then you could call it. V'chein adim Shabbos shkolim, so to would apply to a week where we have 3 Sefer Torah of Shkolim or Chodesh. Also, we can take out 3 Sefer Torah. So one should be careful. Hold on, I just want to see the law again. Afilim writes in the Kreis Sefer Torah Rishon Shmeni Gavri Ein Rashi in Kreis Kohen Shia Shmini Kivan Shadain Ein Zamashlam Kreis Sefer Torah. Sorry, so what he's saying is that in the first Torah you should not call a Kohen to the final Aliyah in the first Torah, even if you can have 8 readings, because it's not completed yet. The second Torah for Torah, which is Rosh Chodesh, that you could call a Kohen if you already did 7. But if you didn't do 7, and then again also, then you shouldn't call a Kohen. But the third reading, the third Torah, which is Mafta, then you could always have a Kohen. Okay, let's see the footnotes to be more clear. And then Aaron, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah. Okay. We have a proper person who always reads the Torah, but we take turns reading the Haftorah with different people. My question is that they give the last Aliyah to the guy who's reading the Haftorah. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, of course. The person who gets the person who gets the Haftorah gets the Maftir. It's called the Maftir. That's the last reading. That person could be a Kohen or a Levite. The only thing is, the only problem is that he's saying that there's a few times a year we take out 3 Torahs. 2 Torahs we take out quite often. Whenever there's a Rosh Chodesh or whenever there's a Yom Tov, we have 2 Torahs because the Musaf reading is a separate part of the parsha. However, there's sometimes in the year we take out 3 Torahs. One is of course Simchas Torah. Then he says the last aliyah of the first reading could be a Kohen. However, in a case where Shabbos Chanukah or Shabbos HaChodesh or Shabbos Shkolim, we also could take out 3 Torahs if it's Rosh Chodesh, because in that case, it's not exactly the same because we haven't completed the actual reading, so better not to give it the last aliyah to Kohen. Yes,
Right, but we're saying is that it's your turn this week to read the Haftorah, so you're getting the last Aliyah.
Yes, that's how it works. The person who reads the Haftarah gets the last Liyah. Again, in some communities, the person who reads the Haftarah, who gets Maftir, will say the brachos, but the actual reading of the Haftarah could be by maybe possibly the Bakor or someone else. If a person, for instance, wants the opportunity to get Maftir and Haftarah, even if they can't read it, it's still not a problem. And some shows only have that custom. They're not to embarrass, or for whatever reason, that only a Balkor would read the Haftarah, not the person themselves. Yes, Rebecca.
If I get to shul late and I'm trying to catch up, is it okay to say Shema and Shmona Esrei while they're leaning?
Excellent question. They're not going to go into that in these laws because it's not laws of Kriyas Torah, but traditionally one, and it's not easy because a lot of people use that time to catch up or to learn or to, God forbid, do other things. One, it's brought down halacha that when one reads, when the Torah is being read in the shul, you're supposed to pay attention to the reading. It's not a time to catch up or read the shul newsletter or what have you. One is supposed to pay attention, follow along with the chazan, and it says even if you're a Torah scholar, one should not study Torah and should pay attention to the reading. So again, I'm not judging because a lot of people do it. A lot of people use that time to catch up or to read. And I've tried to make a commitment to not do that, but sometimes if I'm in a rush, reading the Torah, actually, I'm very careful now. I used to not learn or do anything but just to pay attention. But yeah, it's better not to. So
But if we're reading the English, because I need the translations to understand it, I just continue to read it even if I'm past the part that he's reading. Is that okay?
If possible, to stay along with the chazan, with the.
But what if oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What if I'm trying to finish Shmona Esrei before the Sofsman Tefillah? Or before like the rabbi starts like his drasha or something. Like I would think the priority is davening over my hearing Kriyas Torah. Like, should I go outside so it's not disrespectful to the Torah? Like, what's the right thing to do?
Listen, in such a situation, I hear what you're saying. It's a question. But if we're talking about specifically Sofsman Kriya, Sofsman Tefillah, and your question is if you should daven at that point or not. if you're very makbid in the self-smart tefillah, maybe then you could daven. But traditionally, you should try to pay attention to the reading.
Is this a women's issue? Because when I get to shul, if you know what time shul starts, you get there when it starts or soon after, and then you'll always be online. But the women aren't there until later.
Not all of us comment exactly when shul starts.
No one does. I understand that, but women definitely don't. They come much later, and they come.
Aaron, don't generalize. Some women are very careful to come on time. It depends on each individual.
Yeah.
I ask
Barbara wanted to ask something.
Yeah, when they're reading the Torah, sometimes I will get caught up in reading the commentary that goes along with the Torah. Is that allowed, or should I not do that?
Again, the idea really is to stick with the reading. I mean, again, I'm not saying people don't do it. People definitely do it. And
because my Hebrew's not that good, and I'm like Aaron.
It's again, if your Hebrew's not good and you're following along in the English as it goes along, to be peeking in, but to get like engrossed in so to say in a Rashi or something, and then lose track, maybe it's better not. But the scanning along as you're learning it is obviously different than just engrossing yourself. Yes, Rebecca.
Thank you.
So my understanding is that you have to stand up for the bracha before in the beginning of the aliyah, but not everyone stands for the bracha at the end of the aliyah. Is that correct?
Listen, people are more careful to stand for the blessing on the Torah. The first Baruch Hashem and Baruch, the first blessing is the more important one. And some people are not makbid so much on that. I mean, they'll lift themselves up to stand for the entire blessing. People are maybe less makbid. There's different customs of standing for the reading itself in general. Some people stand, some people don't stand. There's different customs when it comes to these things, but to definitely in the first blessing to stand is a way of honoring the blessing of Torah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's just do the footnotes on this. Footnote number 1 is one who is called to the Torah reading is called the Ola, the person who goes up. The privilege of being called to the Torah is referred to as the Aliyah. So the Ola is the person. The Aliyah is the
what does Ola mean, and what does
Ola means? Ola. So he's just explaining. Ola means to go up. Aliyah means the going up. So the go up is the person who's called up, and the Aliyah is the person who's being called up. For what portion of that being called up is called the Aliyah. So you're getting the call. You're going to be the one being called up for this part of the reading, which is called the Aliyah. That part when a person's called up. About adding the reading. See, Maseches Megillah 21a. On Shabbos, there must be no less than 7 aliyahs. However, if there are present those who are obligated, see, like when you ask me what's the definition of extreme, so he says the definition of extreme is, however, if there are present those who are obligated to have an aliyah, additional aliyahs may be added. Again, it's not preferable, but if you're talking about it seems like what he's referring to is not just to honor the grandfather and the uncles and all the cousins to come for the wedding, but really when you have an obligation. A chassan himself has an obligation. A yard site, these are times when a person is supposed to be called up. But just to give someone an aliyah because they came to shul is maybe a little less of what's called urgency. Number 3. Subjected like hyaluronic acid. He says on Chodesh Teves occurs on Shabbos. So he says one for Shabbos, one for Chanukah, and one for Rosh Chodesh. So then he says, sorry, Chanukah comes first. Then he says, in that case, it is not permitted to call the Kohen for the 8th one. He says, okay, now he explains over here. The ruling is in accord with the second opinion mentioned in the Ramah. If, however, the Kohen went up to the Torah, we may rely on others who rule that the Kohen and Levi may be called up even after the required aliyahs, may be called up even after the required aliyahs. If this happens, it is preferable to call a Levi after Kohen and then a Yisrael. See Mishnah Berurah. I mean, so if you by mistake you call a Kohen, you should then do again the cycle of a Levi and then a Kohen again, and then Yisrael. It's hard to see. See Mishnah Berurah. This is done in order to avoid casting down on the Cohen's lineage, like I said. See Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the following halacha. Okay. So let's stop here.
The list goes on and on.
Just one quick question.
Yes.
You on Simchas Torah, a lot of shuls in Brooklyn that I've gone to, I can't talk for the ones I didn't go to, they will allow every single person in the shul who wants to come up get a aliyah, but only on that day.
Yes, so it's because of Simchas Torah, then it's like everyone's obligated to get an aliyah. Even in Chabad, we would read the Torah over and over and over again to give an aliyah. So the custom is that everyone gets called up, even children get called up, even under the age of 13 get called up for aliyahs on the Simchas Torah.
And a Sephardic shul that I sometimes go to, they put a talit up, put all the kids under the talit, and then they help them say it.
That's the aliyah of Kol Hanarim, yes, aliyah for the children. Let's just do actually one more law because this completes this idea of the Kohen and the Levites. If by mistake you call a Kohen or Levi in middle, if let's say it happens sometimes, this is always the question. A good gabbai never calls up someone unless you know who they are, right? So if you call up someone and you don't know he's a Levite or a Kohen, so what do you do? Because it's the middle, he's a Kohen and Levite supposed to be first. So someone else should come up instead, but that Kohen shouldn't go down because then again, you're maybe casting doubt on the person's lineage. Should stand there until the maftir, and then that automatically take the maftir aliyah. Or the final aliyah, which a Kohen and Levi is allowed to take, the Achrim and Akrim after we call the 7. Again, footnote number 5 is okay. Just the reference.
But they always ask in my shul.
That's part of the job of the Gabe is part of the job of the Gabe is to make sure the Torah is in the right place and to make sure that the aliyahs. That's also in other circles. In a more organized shul, they will have little plates that tell the person in advance what aliyah you're getting. So again, these are all ways.
Oh, we got those plates.
Yes, that's all part of the way of streamlining the experience of the reading. Don't put people in shock. Don't get people prepare. Make sure they're there. If the Levite should know who's being called up. If there's any questions, you could say something. Again, that helps streamline the whole experience of the reading of the Torah. Some shuls are careful, some shuls are not. Some shuls like the suspense if I'm going to get an aliyah. And I'm sitting there waiting. Am I going to get the aliyah or not? All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining. And see you next week in this class. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Glad you didn't skip.